It's quite self-evident that you need to confront unconscious people more often to practice mindfulness and non-reactiveness. Despite this fact, certain people are not only negative but dangerous. You know, there are varying degrees in negativity. It could extend to involve criminals and serial killers, or simply the nagging spouse who never stops complaining. That being the case, you need to learn how to identify the ones you should avoid altogether and the people that are witless but non-threatening. The biggest shock I had while reading the book is when the author said that most dangerous personalities are people who behave often like very normal individuals. What got me further concerned is how some of them could turn out to be highly intelligent, seductive, ambitious, or even famous, which makes it tricky to identify them. The author's job as an FBI profiler is to converse with a stranger for a few minutes, and based on his behavioral quirks and verbals, he should discern if he's dangerous or not. In this book, he shares decades of experience on the traits of the most dangerous personalities out there. Today, we'll be covering the traits of the first dangerous personality, but before we begin, I'd like you to keep in mind, in each and every one of these personalities, there are varying degrees. Some are worse than others. I'll be sharing stories and behavioral cues to illustrate cases from all over the spectrum, so you could get a clear sense of who's hostile and who's tolerable. While I talk, try to picture someone you know who could match the character traits that I'm gonna describe. Now let's dig in. The narcissistic personality. There could be numerous definitions for the word narcissist. In this context in particular, it precisely refers to someone who seeks his own happiness by all means necessary. The opposite is the normal person who does strive for his own happiness, but without violating any laws or boundaries. Character trait number 1. Egocentric. The core personality trait that constitutes a narcissistic personality is egocentrism. There comes a time in your childhood where you start perceiving yourself as the inmost center of the universe. Should you not get the toys you want, the food and affection you want, you get all whiny and fidgety. Everyone around ought to serve you your needs, or else they'll get tormented by an everlasting stream of tears and screaming. Much like the Oedipus complex, where the boy declares war on his dad, this egoistic phase is also as normal and is outgrown by most children. Unfortunately, kids who fail to get past this stage develop the narcissistic personality. Even in their late life, adult life, they still carry along that same old perception of themselves as being the center of the world. The following are basic examples. Let's say your friend calls you for coffee. You respond that you're busy, he gets really mad and accuses you of hating him. He or she will often try to provoke you by saying that you don't want to hang out with them anymore. Should you not text a narcissist back in time, they would spend weeks ignoring you. If they ask you to lend them some money, you apologize and say that you can't, they would get mad and start calling you names. This is the narcissistic egocentrism at work. Either they get what they want from you without delay, or else they'll turn defensive. It's all about them, their needs. Do you think they'll take into account your personal issues, your feelings, your time? Hell no. A narcissistic friend would call you up in the middle of the night because they had insomnia or some other bullshit, and now they want you to narrate a story for them to help them fall asleep. They couldn't care less if you had work tomorrow, a family, or kids to care for. While going through the various real-life stories the author had shared, I remembered my own personal experience with narcissistic friends. Hanging out with narcissists, if you don't comply to any of their suggestions, they would hold a grudge against you for weeks. Most people are afraid to disagree with them, even their families. Should you ever say no when they ask for a favor, they would mock you and/or block your Facebook or any other childish variant of that. Their best friends are often people who slave for them. You can almost feel a negative aura radiating from narcissistic personalities. Simply nod your head to each and every stupid request of theirs and you won't experience any dark force emissions. So the first character trait of the narcissistic personality is egocentrism. The person has this distorted conception that the whole world revolves around him. Consequently, he will behave like a baby in cases where people refuse to serve him his wants and desires. Egocentrism also refers to conceit and pretentiousness. Because they see themselves as the center of the universe, they will toil to get everyone's attention. In any social gathering, narcissistic personalities ensure that everyone perceives them as high-value people. They want all eyes on them, either by wearing expensive watches, clothes, doing dramatic entrances, or by perfectly dolling themselves up. More often than not, they shamelessly boast about their connections with so-and-so rich and famous individuals. Although they accomplish very little, they never cease to brag, and not only that, they perceive themselves as professionals in their field. Narcissists, you show them their flaws, they start crying, or worse, fault you for failing to discern their skillfulness. Confronted with a crisis, they blame everyone except themselves. They operate on a built-in victim mindset. Because he's conceited, because he has an exaggerated self-love, the narcissist perceives himself as perfect, and so pointing the finger at himself is out of the question, even though he's convinced that he's in the wrong. Admitting his mistakes would contradict what he conceives himself to be: flawless. Character trait number 2. Overvalues self, devalues others. A solid depiction of extreme narcissism is Hitler. His craving for attention led him to attempt the domination of the whole world. He thought of the Nazis as the ultimate human race and saw everyone else as marginal. Narcissistic personalities have an eerie ability to spot insecurity in others. They often use this to put others down to make themselves look better, much like a bully. More on bullying later, by the way. Even though they don't always verbalize aloud their insults, they never cease to judge and mock people mentally within themselves. If you ever hang out with a narcissist, you've probably noticed how often they talk in people's backs. They will scan every environment they enter and judge anyone around based on their looks, clothes, the way they walk, just to reassure themselves that they still look better than perfect and unique. You will never ever see them cheering someone up. In fact, if you're anxious before your first date, they'll make you even more anxious by narrating how awkward their first date was. A toxic presence. They always make sure everyone around them feels like shit, as this in turn will boost their mood for the better. Common examples is how, at times, they'd importune you with lame questions non-stop till you lose your temper. They will not cease to question until you answer them. Or another one, they would list out your weaknesses in front of everyone just to provoke a reaction from you. Basically, anything that's annoying, tempting, or irritating, they will use it against you. The reason why they bully you is because they lack empathy, and this is the third character trait. Instead of empathy, you'll find arrogance and entitlement. Narcissistic personalities have a hard time taking into account other people's feelings. Before acting, they think only about getting their way, disregarding what could ensue. I once stumbled across a medical forum. People in the comments were sharing tips and tricks on how to manage a certain chronic illness. To my surprise, some troll was making fun of them. I couldn't process the fact that even though these people were in pain, that guy didn't hesitate to post his screwed up remarks. Can't he see that they are in constant physical pain? Can't he feel what they feel? This is the narcissistic personality. What's more screwed up is that some narcissists perceive illness in others as weakness. They feel uplifted in the presence of other people's suffering. Much like transactions, friendship for them can be traded for any kind of material value. If I need a ride to college every day and you have a car, deal, let's be friends for now. If you don't have a car, I can't use you, and hence it's needless befriending you. Imagine you're sick, for example, and can't go out. They wouldn't understand and accuse you of not wanting to hang out with them. They may phone about your sickness, but only to inquire about when you're gonna get well and available again for them. There's a certain agenda behind their empathy. Showing care, love and affection, even toward their kids, is a matter of give and take. More on narcissistic parents later. Sometimes, although you do serve them what they want, they break their promises. Nothing for something, that's the mentality. The examples I've been sharing so far are considered mild. The following is a relevant story that illustrates the most extreme cases concerning lack of empathy. You've probably heard of the parents who are video game addicts. One day, the screaming of their baby had been too loud and irritating. What did they do? They resolved the issue by killing the boy and burying him in the backyard so they could play at ease. Now don't get all paranoid, not all narcissistic people are quite as crazy. There are varying degrees to this syndrome. Some are worse than others, but this example should illustrate the most extreme. A yearning to please oneself by any means, at others' expense and with reptilian indifference. 4. Takes shortcuts, bends rules, violates boundaries. They will hurt you emotionally and or financially, and you'll never hear a single apology from them. The narcissistic person feels entitled to do anything, and because he sees perfection in himself and his very acts, beauty is in the eyes of the narcissistic personality. A solid depiction of this could be the employee who takes financial risks unbeknown to his company's CEO, the boss who threatens to fire his employee because he refuses to lend him money or service, the abusive parent, the pedophile priest, the thief banker. All these pals are vivid depictions of someone who violates personal and professional boundaries. The narcissistic personality will thoughtlessly risk your time, money, and at worst your life to get their way. Stepping back, saying sorry, is not in their DNA. They think that there's nothing wrong in their foolishness. This personality is also known for its yearning to take the easy way out. Have you ever heard of an athlete who got caught using steroids during a competition? Bingo, that's probably a narcissistic person. Another good example of bending the rules is bullies. Bullying and narcissism go hand in hand, by the way. Bullies will violate your personal space, comfort, and laws or policies of their college, workplace, etc. Though they are fully conscious of the wrongness of their acts, they keep on regardless. Some people tolerate bullying just because they think that the bully is gonna change for the better one day or another. Keep in mind, those bloodsuckers never change, not until they seek medical care. More on bullying in the points to come. Before we move on to the next trait, a crucial thing to keep in mind: these people may act very normal and friendly most of the time, especially around strangers. But wait until you get to know them and you'll soon realize that their dark side outweighs their humaneness. Their ability to act accordingly more often makes it harder for you to figure out whether or not they are dangerous. But with this information at your disposal, you will hopefully get a glimpse on how to identify narcissistic personalities. Trait number 5. Need to control. Acting normal surely makes it harder for you to see past their mask, but what makes it even more difficult is how some of them are highly cunning, seductive, ambitious, or famous. I know saying that narcissistic personalities could be ambitious contradicts what I said earlier concerning their yearning for shortcuts. But recall that I also said that there are varying degrees and types of narcissists. On one level, you can find someone who embodies 80% egotism, 80% lack of empathy, and 0% longing for shortcuts. Thus he'll turn out to be narcissistic yet intelligent, diligent, and ambitious. But on another level, you could also meet someone who embodies 0% lack of empathy, only 40% egotism, and whose yearning for shortcuts is at 100%, which makes him for sure narcissistic, yet unintelligent, unambitious, and lazy. There is no black and white when it comes to studying people's behaviors. Sorry for the digression, guys, I had to. Now let's keep on. A large number of quote-unquote ambitious narcissistic personalities hustle hard to reach high positions, like policeman, doctor, surgeon, not for the large salary, but for they can control others. A highly narcissistic doctor may take pleasure in the suffering of his patient by experimenting with various medications on him, owing to the fact that if he follows what the doctor says, he'll get better in no time. After a decade of trying out various methods, the patient is confused as to why nothing has worked so far. Perhaps the problem is not the type of medication, but the type of doctor himself. Other narcissistic doctors couldn't care less to explain all the details about your illness, just to keep you in the dark so you're obliged to frequent them more often. They want you to visit them more frequently. They feel significance when someone is reaching out to them. They take pleasure in that godlike feeling of someone begging for their help. Now, don't get all paranoid again. These are just informative examples and are not to be taken as face value. Not every doctor is narcissistic. I know that this is needless to say, but when it comes to studying behaviorism, it involves grasping countless nuanced points that usually get misinterpreted by most people. For this, I want to be as straightforward as possible to clear out as much potential confusions. The most accurate depiction I could find for this character trait is the narcissistic police officer. Most people choose to work in the police department just for the sake of working, or because they simply like the job. A narcissist, on the other hand, will seek out this job in particular just so he could exercise power and authority over people. Almost any position where the person could be perceived as above others, the narcissistic personality will be interested in it. They love to boss people around. Picture this character type as a vampire. Each of his various steps is intended to soak up everyone's attention, happiness, and welfare by any means, and then transmute that energy to boost his ego. Now we've finished detailing the 5 character traits of the narcissistic personality. For the time being, I'm gonna further elaborate on some additional yet crucial points. This following segment could also serve as a summary coupled with further detailed examples for each character trait we've seen. Encounters with a narcissistic personality, plus how they impact you. The narcissistic personality will either leave you uneasy, troubled, unfulfilled, or tormented. The degree of chaos brought upon you will be determined depending on how dangerous is the person you're dealing with. Here's an example for a mild, not so dangerous case. In high school, I remember this sports coach of mine. There wasn't a day in class where she didn't yell, belittle, mock, and sometimes slap students who didn't get the moves right. If you happened to smile at her, she would kick you in the balls, I kid you not. When chance struck and everyone happened to get the moves right, this teacher would get bored because there was no incentive for her to berate us at that point. So what she did in these instances was try to provoke a reaction from a student just so she could bite back. If you ask me how it felt like to be her student, I wouldn't think of any nearer to the truth description other than training for the Marines or some shit. She was a miniature image of Hitler. This person's presence always gives me slight headaches, faint fever, ear pain, irritation, temptation to react, resentment, a wanting to exit the room, tenseness in facial expressions, and a feeling like I don't want to stick around for long. The reason why I shared this story coupled with how I felt like beside this person is to make it easier on you to remember someone who makes you feel the same. In spite of that story, my sports teacher is not considered dangerous. I would guess that her degree of narcissistic insanity ranged from 40 to 50%, but she lacked empathy for sure. She is tolerable, but not for the long haul. Living with such person will engender either trauma, depression, or low self-esteem, because of her constant degrading of the people around her. The following is a compilation of behaviors I think best describe the most dangerous cases. 1. They bribe bullies to beat you up merely because you didn't serve them what they wanted. 2. They will avenge themselves on you by doing crazy things, like steal your car, kidnap your kid, or in quite extreme and psychotic instances, they will not hesitate to put a gun in your face. With psychotic narcissists, expect that they will cause either drastic physical, emotional, or financial harm to you and your beloved ones, with total indifference. The following is another neat summary of traits and behaviors that may be used to identify violent and non-violent narcissistic personalities. 1. Devalues others, perceives himself as the center of attention, inconsiderate of others' needs, wants, feelings, or illnesses. Befriends people, not for their values and qualities, but based on how much they could gain out of them. If you fail to help them, you'd anticipate an outburst of rage and resentment. Oftentimes, they will act nice, flirty, only to get their way. Negative or narcissistic? I have to point out that negative doesn't mean narcissistic. Negativity is a general term that could encompass various traits ranging from simple to extreme, from complaining per se to killing. I'm alluding that the word negative is quite vague to use as a compass to identify narcissistic personalities. Instead, rely on very precise behavioral cues and also the emotions you feel beside that person's presence. Not every negative individual is narcissistic. Sometimes even positive people turn a bit negative because they're going through a hard time. Others are negative but aren't narcissistic. The distinction between the negative person who's non-threatening and the narcissistic is that the latter will never fail, not even once, to make you feel like shit. Even though they seem normal most of the time, as I said earlier, every time you get together, there has to be a moment in the interaction where they're gonna sting you sharply. You can also use people's motives as a compass. For example, let's say you have two friends. The first one always says that he goes to the gym because of the many health benefits of working out. The second usually says, with a serious tone, that he likes working out because he wants to look better, stronger than everyone else. Your second friend is probably narcissistic. Of course, this isn't a definite conclusion. I could be working out for health benefits but say aloud, only this time, in a humorous tone, that I'm exercising to look stronger than other people, i.e. as a joke. The point being, don't take what I say as face value. I hope you've got the point, and I do trust that my subscribers are capable of critical thinking. If you're inexperienced in terms of social dynamics, screening, I would suggest you take your time if you're trying to study someone's behavior. The last thing you'd want to do is judge someone as dangerous because they started acting strange out of the blue. It might be that he or she is going through a hard time. You don't really know. The narcissistic personality in relationships. 1. As a lover. The narcissistic lover is more dangerous than a mere friend. The relationship often revolves around one person serving the other his unending needs and desires. They often bond with people who are naive, inexperienced, and those of low self-esteem. The narcissistic chooses such partner just so he could more easily manipulate and keep them on the hook. Remember that narcissists could be highly intelligent and skillful in terms of seduction despite their syndrome. Love for them is a matter of give and take. They rarely offer help or display affection for free. Their disinterest in contributing is palpable. Whatever their partner says or does to satisfy them, they never seem appreciative thereof. The narcissistic personality will quite often cheapen his partner's efforts, criticize everything they do, and make them feel like they did something wrong. A solid example for this is a story by the author. Paraphrasing, of course, the story describes a husband who spent hours upon hours looking for the perfect birthday gift for his wife, only for her to toss the present on the wall in the end. Narcissistic partners, should you deny one of their requests, should you ever err in the slightest, they'll threaten to leave you or hold a grudge against you for weeks. Childish. There never goes a day where things go smoothly and everyone's at peace. Daily, there has to be some kind of drama or debate going back and forth, or else they'll get bored and devoid of meaning. They will often point out something wrong in their partner's makeup, dress, or demeanor, instead of at least giving a half-hearted compliment. Engaging in a relationship with narcissistic personalities will cause you drastic, lifetime mental and emotional damage, ranging from depressions to sporadic suicidal thoughts. 2. The narcissistic parent. Because narcissistic personalities aspire to be seen as flawless, they will strongly push their kids to become the best as well. Though the child actually toils to get his parents' approval, the parent often seems unsatisfied with his accomplishments. Not until he gets that A+, the kid won't get any praise or affection. Narcissistic parents push their kids past their limits, not because they want to see them flourish, but only for they could brag about their A's in front of their friends. They may help the kid attain fame and prosperity, but their motives are always to make their kids seem rich and talented, so they themselves can be perceived as the parent of so-and-so, so they can reap the benefits as well. So when their child becomes a professional athlete, for example, they could finally take selfies in the Olympics and boast about it on Facebook. In some cases, a narcissistic parent will feign being supportive, encouraging his child to work hard, only to ask him one day to return the favor, some sort of subtle parental exploitation. One day, the child may figure out that he's being used, and this could result in scorching trauma. To picture a narcissistic person, always remember the vampire analogy. Every step they take is meant to drain the happiness of others, to boost their own mood and reinforce their ego. Oftentimes, narcissistic parents are unsupportive and reckless toward their kids. They do not care less in how their child got bullied today or why did he get home full of cuts and bruises. They usually don't pay too much attention to his emotional and material needs. Consequently, the kid feels neglected, lacking in love and affection, develops personality disorders. As you probably know, a youngster constructs the building blocks of his personality by imitating his parents' behaviors. And because of this, narcissistic parents can inadvertently transfer on terrible character traits. The most common one is indifference. Because they withdrew love and affection for their kids, the poor wretches grow up lacking empathy themselves, quite ruthless, pretentious, disrespectful, inconsiderate, and unapologetic. If you haven't noticed it yet, these traits perfectly describe bullies. And yes, bullies stem from a careless, unsympathetic, narcissistic parent. The child, having been deeply wounded, will roam around like a bloodsucker, inflicting on others that same emotional void he himself had gone through. Unfortunately, narcissistic parents conceive narcissistic children. To wrap this up, I wanted to emphasize again that there are varying degrees in severity when it comes to dangerous personalities. That being the case, not every narcissistic person is dangerous. As I said, some are more tolerable than others. If you sense that someone close to you is dangerous, please refer to the book as a guide and not this video. The author has compiled a checklist of the most common behaviors in narcissistic personalities. The checklist is based on decades of experience and will help you validate any suspicions and assure you whether or not the person you're dealing with is dangerous or tolerable. This video could help you identify those people. but its primary purpose is to shed light on the major character traits of the most dangerous personalities, and is not to be taken as the ultimate guide to validate your assumptions about a seemingly dangerous person. Self-love or selfishness. In spite of what I said in the previous segments, each and every one of us is at least 1 to 2% narcissistic. Otherwise, you'd be selling your house for $5. Here, I'm not referring to the word narcissistic in its literal sense, but in a sense that every person loves himself to a certain degree. You should be able to differentiate between self-love and narcissism. Without self-love, you wouldn't have any drive to build a better life for yourself. But should self-love exceed a certain threshold, it turns into narcissism. Always remember, a narcissistic person embodies an exaggerated self-love combined with selfishness. I'll probably further elaborate on this point in another video. In closing, the author speculated that some people may suggest helping those dangerous individuals heal. This book doesn't include it. It's mainly about learning how to identify them and cut them out of your life completely. If you wish to help them gain humanity once more, the author encourages you to read other books about that matter. Educating yourself about the causes that made those people the way they are and how to help them heal is a good thing, but the only thing that matters now is your safety and the safety of your beloved ones. I'll be sharing techniques and tips on how to fend off psychotic narcissists in my upcoming videos. As for next week's video, I'll be covering the character traits of the second most dangerous personality. Before I let you go, I wanted to say that I really appreciate your support so far, guys. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback lately. Thank you so much for watching and talk to you soon.